ORCAA Finance. Should I start over?
Sure. Why don't you start over?
Yeah, sorry,
Good
I didn't
morning.
get that.
That's okay. So we're gonna call this meeting to order. This is the January 14th, 2026 ORCAA Finance Committee meeting. And the first action item on our agenda is approval of the agenda.
Could we do introductions first, just because
Okay.
we've got a number of staff here? So
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start in the room with intros and we can start on the side.
Good morning, everyone. Rob, Inspection Supervisor with ORCAA.
Awesome.
I'm Jeff Johnston, Executive Director.
Tyson Justice, Financial Service Manager.
Tiffany Flores, Records Specialist.
And I'll just mention that also online, we've got Dan Nelson, Communications Manager running Zoom, and Chris Kraus and Abby Roberts, staff are listening in as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'm Emily Klaus, Thurston County Commissioner and Chair of the Finance Committee. And then I'll go with electeds on my, I see at least one.
Mike French, Clallam County Commissioner.
Perfect.
Greg Brotherton, Jefferson County Commissioner.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, we'll go to the approval of the agenda. Are there any corrections, additions, omissions, or are we ready to approve? All right. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right. And non-debatable, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Beautiful. Passes unanimously.
And it looks
Oh,
like
hey, Randy. We just did intros. Do you want to give a quick intro? Oh, you're on mute.
Randy Netherland, Mason County.
Perfect. And we just approved the agenda. So now we're going on to approval of the minutes. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review those from last time, and I'm looking for a motion.
Move to approve the minutes of November 12th, 2025.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, perfect. Off to a good start. So we are on new business and we'll start with the fiscal year 2026 second quarter update.
okay. Well, with that, I don't think I've got much to say, so I think I'm just gonna turn it right over to Tyson.
Yep. Dan, do you mind pulling up the Q2 packet for us? And then just scroll down to the statements, and we'll start at the very first page of the statements there, just to reference people. So I'll go ahead and start. So overall, we ended Q2 of fiscal year 2026 with a year-to-date deficit of $58,317 through December 31st, 2025. This brings our overall fund balance roughly $4,442,000. At this time last year, our fund balance was roughly $4,635,000, which equates to roughly a 4% decline in our fund balance year over year. Both revenue and expenditure utilization rates remain within an acceptable benchmark of 50%. And so I'm going to talk about revenue next, so you can just leave it there, Dan. Thanks. Looking at revenue, penalty revenue continues to exceed its projected budget. As of the end of December, penalty revenue has exceeded its budget by 67% or $115,000. Compared to last fiscal year, penalty revenue has increased by roughly 122%. Unfortunately, this increase in penalty revenue has not been enough to fully offset the absent core funding and capital outlays related to building and project costs. Applying the average core revenue received through Q2 of the prior 4 fiscal years would result in a net gain of approximately $69,000 this fiscal year. Jeff will speak more about where we stand with the core funding in a bit. Looking ahead on the revenue side, we expect to start receiving annual assessment revenue beginning in January, which will be accounted for in our Q3 financial update. It is my hope penalty revenue collection remains strong through Q3, and we receive greater clarification on the implementation date of our core grant funding. This, along with assessment revenue, will hopefully lead us through Q3 and into a strong fourth quarter. Moving down to expenditures, could you scroll down a little bit, Dan, to the expenditures? Perfect. Thank you. Overall expenditures are within their expected utilization benchmark of 50%. However, you will notice within the expenditure subcomponents, there are budget burn rates which exceed the 50% benchmark. Those subcomponents are building maintenance building operations / maintenance and program operations. And more specifically, alarm monitoring and building operations and Mountain View site improvements and program operations. Luckily, these increases are not the result of reoccurring expenditures, but were a one-time cost for fire and security panel replacements and the installation of a new Mountain View monitoring shelter. Looking ahead on the expenditure side, we plan on presenting an amended budget for consideration during the February Finance Committee. The amended budget will include budget increases in building operations. These increases will be for the replacement of 2 heat pumps and either partial or full replacement of our roof, which I will discuss in my manager's update later. In summary, taking into consideration missing core funding, I believe we are still in a strong position financially. But as we gain more information about our core funding, we will need to get ahead of any potential permanent decreases. We will continue to monitor our finances closely and update the board and this committee when any new factual or potential material changes occur. And that's it. So are there any questions about any of the specific line items on the Q2 financial statements, or any questions in general?
Questions for Tyson? Go ahead, Greg.
I guess I'm just eager to hear Jeff's update on the core grants,
Sure.
but whenever we get to that, so I'll hold my questions for them.
All right. Randy, I saw you pop on camera. Do you have any questions?
No, but when the time comes, we're gonna have to discuss the deficits.
Yeah, definitely. That was what I was kind of wondering too, is we're in a strong financial position now, and that's good, but when do we expect to start needing to be worried and having a different conversation?
It's my opinion, if we receive negative news about the core funding in which we are receiving permanent decreases on both the federal and state side, I think that's when serious discussions need to start happening. And actually, I'll just pass that on to Jeff, since kind of segue into that, so.
Yeah, I think this is a good time for me to talk about core, and then, also, first, we need to start talking about, and we'll be talking about our, starting to work on our fiscal year 2027 budget. In terms of what happens with the core impacts what's left of this fiscal year, but then I think particularly what we're planning on for next fiscal year. So let me provide an update. So just as a reminder that we receive a core grant from Department of Ecology that includes both a federal component and a state component. The state component is paid for from the MOTCA operating account. And because of projected shortfalls in the MOTCA operating account, the local clean airs were notified by Ecology back at the end of October that our core grant was being reduced by 65% for this biennium, for the ongoing fiscal year 2026 and also fiscal year 2027. So for ORCAA, that results in a reduction from what we were expecting of about 135,000 to a little more than 47,000. And so that's the state part. There is still no definitive information from EPA or from Ecology about the status of the federal core money, which is about $170,000. So the other Washington Air directors and I met in Seattle last week. We were joined for part of that meeting by staff and management from the EPA regional office in Seattle. They reiterated that the federal money was actually committed back in September, and that the EPA staff believe that it will be made available to Ecology any day. And so that meeting was a week ago today, still haven't heard. So again, it was good news to hear from EPA, but until I see something in writing or until I know more, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm also, I'm not counting on it necessarily. Ecology, for their part, did commit to get the grant agreements in place within a matter of days once they have a confirmation of the federal funds. So again, hopefully, we will hear soon, within the next week. But still haven't heard anything specifically. At another part of the meeting last week, Casey Sixkiller, the Director of Ecology, joined us to talk about funding issues. We expressed to him kind of our dismay at the 65% reduction, and that was going to lead to service reductions, that we couldn't just absorb that level of funding increase. So, and another question that we raised with both EPA and ecology, and is that, whether or not, because once those grant agreements in place, are we going to be able to go back and submit funding reimbursement requests going back to the start of our fiscal year? Both EPA and ecology talked about recognizing the importance to us of being able to do that, and said that they would do what they can to make sure that we can do that. So that's something else that we're kind of looking at closely, because, if we get our money, but then can't go back and charge costs, back to the start of the fiscal year, then that's going to be something that we're going to have to look at carefully, or going to have to figure out. So just to summarize, in the fiscal year 2026 budget, we included about $274,000 in federal and state core funding. So again, we've got our total budget's about 3.4 million. So that's, again, a bit less than 10% of the budget, but it's a significant amount. And the core funds, those plus the per capita assessment dollars that we get from cities and counties, is used to pay for things not covered by fees, the unfunded and underfunded things. And the biggest expense is to core is outdoor burning, which costs the agency close to $350,000 a year. Other activities include some of our monitoring work, some of our business assistance, some public education and outreach. And so again, there's a variety of things that we use both the core funding as well as the per capita assessment for. So I and staff are approaching this funding shortfall on kind of two fronts right now. One, we're looking carefully at our fee programs to ensure that our fees are covering the costs of operating those programs. We'll discuss more on this in a few minutes on our next agenda item. But again, where fees don't cover the cost of operating the program, then we have to we fill in with core or assessment dollars. And then the other thing we're doing is we're looking very carefully at how can we reduce the time that we're spending on the things that we do charge to the core grant, such as outdoor burning. So I've in conversations with Mike and Rob, and working with the inspectors on our outdoor burning expenses. And as of January 1st, we're reducing the amount of time that inspectors are spending in the field investigating complaints and outdoor burning. We can, if there are questions, Rob can talk a little bit more about that. But again, the idea is that inspectors will just be spending less time out in the field investigating these things and following up on outdoor burning issues. Another thing that we've done is we've paused the further deployment of the Sensua air quality monitors. We've deployed those to a few spots around our jurisdiction, but until we get more clarity on funding, we just don't think it's prudent, because those do take a fair amount of time to deploy and to maintain. And then more generally, we're just looking very carefully at the other work that the agency does that is not covered by fees. So Tyson's working with the leadership team to again understand exactly what that work is, and so we can have conversations both internally, but also with you, with the Finance Committee, with the board about, okay, what on this do we need to scale back on? So that's kind of the status. What questions, suggestions, advice, what do you want from us on this at this point, or kind of looking forward?
Thanks for that update. I wish it was a little more positive, but I do appreciate being kept in the loop. Randy, I see your hand, go ahead.
Yeah, I have opinions on this one, of course. You know, in the past year and 2 years, we've had certain discussions, and it's time to rehash those discussions again. One of the things that we talked about, and I've been pushing on, is the idea of cutting out and keeping separate so we can keep a better track of those revenues that we got that we took in from fines and stuff like that to make sure that we do not start expending our budget according to those fines and we become reliant on them in order to operate. Again, we need to have that discussion again. The reason why is we're running in the negative. We know that. And apparently, if something's not done, we're going to run in the negative more this year. I'm not saying that's necessarily always the worst case scenario. There are things that have to be looked at, and this happens in every organization, every county, the state, it happens. But what we do about it is where the difference is. One of the recommendations I would have immediately is for us to start to look at separating those out so we can keep better track for ourselves, what we have and what we're working with, and what that deficit means for the future for taking out of that, if we called it a reserve or if we set aside. So we can keep better track, especially for the county in each of the different counties that are in our group. But we need to have our staff, our director, put together recommended cuts and how to operate within the funds that we have. I'm not saying that we do those cuts. What I am saying is when we're prepared for them and we have them given to us in many different options, then we make educated decisions on how to stay within that rather than raise fees and raise the charges that each county is going to pay. Remember, you have counties that are going broke right now, and that possibility of revolt is very, very real. As being a guy that's been here for a long time, I can tell you, Mason County was one of those ones. We almost pulled out of ORCAA to create our own. My only thing that happened back then is I was sent here to basically do that. That's what you always hear me talking about. Well, what happened instead is I actually found I had an organization here that was not the boogeyman, was not the bad guy, that was not trying to rape everybody's money, that was being very fiscally sound and was doing great work with the dollars that they had. I still believe that to this day. I just need to be able to justify it. And in doing that, we need to have these options come from our staff to tell us this is what it looks like. If we don't raise fees here, this is what it looks like. But we need both options to not just raise the fees, but to do the cuts that are necessary. We're going to have a discussion on what is our priorities. For example, for some of our counties, investing in outdoor burns, that is what they are thinking we're doing. So if we cut back on those, is that really what the counties want? The ones that are the body of this? Maybe it is, because we have to look at the different options of, what Jeff will present us of what we have to give up if we don't do that, or if we don't raise costs on that eventually. So that's where I'm at on this. To re-summarize, I think we need to go back and looking at separating out that money so everybody can have an educated understanding of what it is we're doing and what the deficit looks like we're running out of. And then I think we need to start to talk about priorities that we have and the priorities for options to stay within the budget.
Thank you, Randy.
One thing I would like to remind the committee is, we have not received any core funding through the end of the second quarter for this fiscal year. And if we were just to take the average core funding we received, if we take a look back at the last 4 fiscal years through Q2, and we apply the average core funding that we received, we would be sitting at a net gain right now. So really, it's my opinion that this absent core funding is really the large component in our deficit that we have presently.
Thank you, Tyson. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and kind of for your benefit, Emily, and Mike's been kind of involved in some of the conversations, but a lot of this conversation about setting a separate fund aside for those fees exceeding expectations is talking about budgeting, trying to budget that a little bit too, and just making sure that we don't use that. But that's really about one large $2 million fee. And I think Tyson explained well, we expect to get, as Jeff explained, those core grants and building a budget and sticking with the budget and tracking it is kind of the work of this committee. And I do appreciate the staff recommendation so far. I'm happy to have that conversation. We haven't elected to create that separate budget line or center to this point, but always happy to have that conversation. I think regarding outdoor burns, that does seem like something that the board has kind of, through our actions to kind of hold off on the kind of the voluntary outdoor burn fees. We've kind of made that decision already to lower that level of service. And I think understanding the permutations of our decisions is important. I appreciate that Rob's here. Maybe we can go into that a little bit more, but I think we have been presented the options already, to a degree. So I just kind of want to stand up for the process to this point. I think the conversation about whether to start a fee structure, a voluntary program, as we were talking about for the outdoor burns is still open. And I think it will get more acute as staff makes the appropriate compensations with capacity, which is, less enforcement on those. And I think I hope that doesn't result as I kind of got the gist from Randy's comments that some of the member counties or cities think that ORCAA is not doing its work now. And I think it's our job as members too, to take the message back to our respective legislative municipalities that these are decisions that we made to make sure that we didn't go further with these fees, I guess. So, we're sitting in the stew that we made at this point. And the lack of core grant, as Tyson said, is a temporary setback that we're compensating for with, again, those slightly higher fee revenue than expected. But I guess I don't see note for alarm yet, but just we've got to make sure that we communicate back to the groups that we represent here as to the decisions that we've made.
Actually, one clarification, Greg, before maybe one to Randy, is you said fee higher than expected fees, but what you mean is higher than expected penalties.
Yes, thank you. I misspoke.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Greg. Go ahead, Randy.
So just wanted to clarify, I definitely wasn't saying that ORCAA wasn't doing their job, and that was not what, if that's what was taken, it was definitely not what was meant. What I meant to say by that was, if that's what we go less on, that they may feel that that's the most important issue to them, and that they think that is our job. So the more we go back on that, that may occur where they may be worrying about that or thinking about that. And as for the idea of, we're not in trouble yet, I've got a county where I haven't raised taxes since 2017, but I have more money put away than we've had in the history, for cash on hand in doing the same thing. But one of the reasons why is I recognized something right away because I was broke, because we were backwards, because we were have to lay everybody off when I first came in. The bow wave is what the thing you have to worry about in every organization. It's not what you pay today. It's how that doubles and triples each year as it starts to go on. So if you stay in front of it and keep the amount or the cut tiny today, it avoids the big cut tomorrow, because that bow wave just goes. It doubles, it triples. And that's not a guess. I'm telling you, through all my years of history, that's exactly what happens. But one tiny cut today stops that from happening and gives you 3, 4, 5 years without having to do major layoffs. And I never want to do that again. So that's what I meant by that. Just wanted you to know.
Thanks, Randy, for that clarification. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm kind of in agreement with Randy to some extent. I think that this, I agree that, our hair's not on fire right now, but you guys are raising kind of the concerns early, which is great. So the sooner that we can have a contingency plan that can go into action, the better off we'll be. So I think that that's wise. So just so that I understand, on the core grant, is this 2 separate disbursements that we get? Or is it one that flows through the state from the feds and from the state?
It flows through the state, so ecology, so there's two pots of money, there's federal money and then there's state money, but ecology we've got essentially one grant agreement with ecology for both of those pots.
Okay.
And so.
And what you were saying is we're hoping to hear any day, which it sucks that you're in that position or in that position, but on the MOTCA, is that tied to this or is that separate?
Yeah, so the MOTCA is the source of the state funding.
Okay.
Yes.
And so my understanding is last budget cycle, a lot of those kind of accounts got swept.
Yes.
So there's a lot of people that are in a very similar boat where they're having to say, I'm sure some of those accounts getting swept was fine, but there's a lot of people who are going back and saying to the state legislature, hey, that was a really concerning thing. Here's why. And so we have to tell the why. And so I'm sure that you're doing that, but if we can be of assistance as, with our relationship with legislators, give us the script and that we can try to be helpful.
Great, thank you, Mike. And that actually foreshadows, and it's one of my updates during the board meeting about some of the legislative conversations that I've started to have. And because I do want to leverage the relationships that you all have with legislators as well, because I think that that's a story that we haven't necessarily done a great job of telling in the past because we've had pretty stable state and federal funding. It's been steady. It hasn't increased in more than 20 years, but it's been fairly stable. And now that it's going away, or in danger of going away and decreasing, we need to be telling that story.
Yeah.
One other thing, if I may jump in with something
Absolutely.
else. So we talked a little bit about outdoor burning, and again, we've had a few months ago conversation about expanding our online notification system beyond Thurston County to our other 5 counties. And so that's something that we're working on implementing at the start of the 2026 burn season, like in October. And that will actually make it easier to manage the system, to manage outdoor burning, because we will have contact information. And again, we'll talk more about that. I don't know, Rob, if you have anything to add at this point, but I think, again, a lot of this stuff is tied together, sort of the conversations that we've had, that we will continue to have around outdoor burning, around our residential burn notification system, and other things are all tied. We are trying to be proactive. And again, I think this is particularly important as we head in to start working on our budget for next fiscal year. So again, what are we doing this current fiscal year? But then particularly important, I think, what are the assumptions that we're making and putting together the draft budget for next fiscal year.
Perfect. Thank you. Those last comments answered some of the questions I was going to ask. I was getting ready to go into the legislative conversation to see how we can advocate at that level, but it sounds like that conversation is coming at the 10 o'clock meeting. So I'll hold those questions. But just know we're out there. We're ready to fight for you all. I'm sure some of my counterparts from other counties go to DC just like us. So we'll be able to advocate on that national level too. So whatever you all need from us, just let us know.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes with like letters too. I think I was working on a letter for EPA last year, and then there's just too much going on, but that's always something we can do too. And we can sign it on behalf of the full board, so that it comes with that leverage that comes with, full board support. So yeah. All right. Anything else on the update on state and federal core grants or ongoing adjustments? Okay, well then we can move on to the staff proposal regarding asbestos and demolition fees.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to kick this off, I think, before handing it off to Rob.
Yeah.
Again, you probably remember that we included in our budget package for fiscal year 2026 a proposal to increase the land clearing burn permit fees to cover the cost of the program. So, like with the land clearing burn permit fees, it's been more than 10 years since we've adjusted our asbestos and demolition fees by more than the consumer price index. So again, each year, these fees have fallen further and further behind at keeping up with the cost of operating the program. So Mike and Rob put this proposal together. Just a couple quick comments before hanging off to Rob. One, I mean, we understand that we can't simply just keep increasing fees, that everybody out there is stressed and stretched. And that in addition to looking at fees, we also need to look at how can we all streamline our own internal processes to ensure that we're operating these programs as efficiently as possible. And so, again, as you know, as described in the briefing memo, this proposal to increase fees gets us, you know, towards 90% cost recovery, and then we're looking at making up the difference through program efficiencies, which are also detailed a little bit. And then the other point I want to make is that we're not actually asking for you to approve this fee increase right now. What we're looking at is just to include, or, you know, either as proposed or the modifications that you would like to see in terms of moving this proposal forward to be part of our draft fiscal year 2027 budget that you will see in a couple months at our March Finance Committee. Again, because there's more moving pieces with our fiscal year 2027 budget this year, we're bringing some things to you before you see that full draft. So this month, we're talking about the asbestos and demolition fees. At our next Finance Committee meeting, we're planning on bringing a similar proposal regarding a registration program fees. And again, the idea being that then this would be included in our budget proposal, which then gets discussed, you know, with the board, and then ultimately out for a 30-day public comment period, and then approved by the board at our June meeting. So with that, I think I'll hand it off to Rob. And yeah, and I don't know if folks want us to bring up the briefing
if you don't
memo
mind
on
pulling that
screen.
up, the attachment piece, the briefing memo letter. Please. Thank you everyone for giving me a chance to talk to y'all. I know I kind of defaulted into the position when Mike decided to go on vacation. But luckily him and I, and in addition to Jeff and Debbie and Dan, we worked on this briefing memo to help bring the cost of running the asbestos and demolition program more equal to, you know, what we're bringing in. I will say, having been an inspector here for about 5 years, asbestos and demolition is a pretty time-consuming process, especially when we get into the enforcement component of it. There's a lot of back and forth emails, site visits, inspections, meetings, and stuff like that, that the current fee structure just does not account for. So what we're proposing here, if you look at the, you know, just the overall, the request, we're talking about increasing the fees. I know that's something we kind of spoke against, but this would make it more equal to what we're actually paying out, right? The impacts budget-wise, as you see there, we're almost spending $250,000 in asbestos demolition. So that's a shortfall, actually, excuse me, of almost $250,000, $225,000. So as you can see, it's very, very negative in the red there. If you keep going down, Dan, to the bottom of the second page there. So the background information is good information about asbestos, kind of how we execute the program, and I'll talk a little bit about it, but let's talk the numbers here just so we can kind of see what we're getting after today. The fee structure here is more aligned with one, other agencies, as well as just kind of bringing it up past the CPI or whatever, because we haven't looked at increasing fees for this substantially in about 10 years. The biggest highlight here, besides obviously the fee increases, is the emergency fees. That'll be double the cost, right? So if you're looking at a $2,000 asbestos project, it's going to be double that cost to do an emergency fee. Emergency fees, emergency waivers of the asbestos demolition process as something that to be fair, we don't adequately have the time to do a thorough review, go out and do a site inspection to see if it warrants doing the emergency waiver. Sometimes it makes sense because of insurance or because of unsafe structure. And those are usually vetted by city or county officials for the county that we're in. This doubling the fee, it makes it like, is it actually worth it to do the the emergency project as it's stated. Is it worth it to do? And then that'll give us time as well to go out to do these site inspections to make sure that it meets the criterion for an emergency waiver of that wait time. The other change in this is instead of doing one notification per parcel, it's now per structure. So instead of, back in the day, we used to do, if you have 2 properties or 3 properties or 4 properties on a one single parcel, it would just be 1 fee. So that $47 there. But now each structure is a its own notification. All right, and that would require the notification, the survey, et cetera, to go through, and then we would be reviewing those individually, kind of like we're already doing. It's just we're not getting that compensated through the fee costs there. So those are the big changes there. And if you keep going down there, there's a little bit more, I believe, on the top of page 3, kind of going about the demolition piece. And then it's important to note that, we have had over 350-ish asbestos notifications throughout our 6 counties for FY25, and about 320 demolition notifications for 2025, FY20 to 25. Each one of those taken roughly 15 minutes to 3 hours to investigate, especially when it comes to issues like they don't have a proper survey, they don't have MDLAP certified lab. There are some nuances in ORCAA's jurisdiction that aren't present in like Puget Sound's jurisdiction, where we require NVLAP certified labs to do the asbestos testing. We ran into an issue not too long ago where there was some confusion on that, and we had to talk. I had to talk through that with a architecture company up in Burien to kind of resolve that. Just working with the city of Olympia, with this company, and then with the contractor as well, just to kind of get that on board. And that just, it takes time to kind of facilitate that, because our goal is not to just write them a ticket, it's to educate them and then to get them to do the paperwork and do it safely, do the work safely. That's the goal, is to execute what they're doing in a proper and safe manner. So I think that kind of covers the highlights of it. Jeff kind of mentioned the efficiency component of it. One of the things that we have done already, it's up on our website, y'all can view it if you'd like, is our kind of our how-to videos. One of the things that I observed is there's a lot of folks involved in the asbestos and demolition process, from our administrative staff like Jackie and Debbie and Tiffany, but there's also the inspector. So it felt like we were kind of double dipping. So one of the things that our inspection team did is we made kind of like how-to videos of talking folks through, this is how you fill out a demolition notification. This is how you fill out a demolition and an asbestos notification. If you're a contractor, this is what you do. We're very fortunate to have Rose, one of our new staff members, is bilingual. She speaks Spanish. So she was able to translate all those videos into Spanish, which is, I feel, very beneficial, because there's a lot of Spanish speaking asbestos contractors in our jurisdiction, and we can just direct them to the videos, and they basically talk through the process as they are filling it out. It's just basically we recorded ourselves filling out these notifications online with a voiceover, and Dan was a big component of that too, helping us do that as well. And it's been pretty beneficial. It's cut down a lot of time that the administrative staff has spent in the asbestos demolition program, because they're kind of they're paired together. So I think with bringing the fees up to kind of meet that level that we're spending, doing the efficiency of things that we talked about with the videos, and we got a couple more ideas that Mike and I are kicking around as far as how to roll those out, to be seen. But doing that and raising the fees, I think we'll see a pretty good cost recovery. And one of the things too, Jeff mentioned it earlier, we're not rolling it out tomorrow. It's going to be for later on, right? One of the things we need to do first is reach out to the asbestos contractors, and we're working on how best to do that. We don't want to just blindside folks and say, oh, spoiler alert, here's a bunch of fee increases, and we don't give them any warning. We want their input, we want their opinions as well. So there will be discussions about that in the future in terms of giving them the information, kind of explaining the why behind the increases and what we're doing also to kind of help make things a little bit more streamlined and easier for them. So, pending your questions, that is all that I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Rob or Jeff? Go ahead, Randy. I thought you would be first with your hand up. Go ahead.
Can you please take a minute and go back to the actual breakdown of the costs? I'd like you to explain them to me a little bit. And just for the people that are here, so you understand, I'm not always against increases. Sometimes they are warranted, and sometimes, you know, it all depends on the amount. When you start talking about 100% increase, that is absolutely scary as hell. But like during COVID, when food prices, I had a food trailer for my son, when food prices went up and they doubled, that was a big difference when it came to chicken being $20 a box or $40 a box, and my pasta being $1.50 or going from $1 to $1.50. So it covered a lot more ground. So when I look at these and I look at the doubling, it does scare me automatically, but the amount we're starting with, I think, is not as high. Could you please explain what do you get for the $47 currently under the single family residence by owner?
So, Randy, when we get a notification, typically that'll go to our administrative staff, permits@orca.org. And what we were doing before is Jackie Wallner, our front desk staff, she was basically ensuring that the survey was correct, ensuring the notification was correct, and then kind of forwarding it on to an inspector. If it needed to be inspected or followed up on, you know, a member of the inspection team would basically do that. I think it's important to note in this method that Jackie was not, or she is not, excuse me, a HERA certified. So, I mean, short of her just practical experience reviewing, you know, countless surveys, she doesn't have the technical background or certification to adequately be reviewing those surveys. So there could be things that she would be missing. So, you know, right off the bat, you have a safety component that theoretically could or could not have been missed. Then that would go to inspector. If it was just a casual kind of run-of-the-mill notification, then, you know, by and large, we would just email the recipient or the applicant the notification and say, hey, you can't start this project until, you know, either 10 days or 14 days, depending on the type of the project.
I need you to back up a little more than that for me. So when they do this, does each person that is going to do construction on a house have to pay this $47 to have it looked at on whether or not it has asbestos? What are they getting exactly? What is it that
So
this triggers?
Gotcha. If they're doing what we would call an asbestos project, i.e. they're removing 10 linear feet or 48 square feet or more of ACM, asbestos construction material, they are required to get a notification. Single family residence by owner, that would be if you wanted to work on your own home, you get a survey, you do the work, that's it. $47, that's you doing the work yourself, you're assuming all risk. And I think it's also important to note that just the work in asbestos, the asbestos industry is very expensive in and of itself, right? So you have annual certifications, you have supervisor training, which also comes with certification, annual certification. Then you have the cost of supplies, which depending on the size and makeup of the project can be very, very expensive and costly in terms of just material alone. You have not only ORCAA's fees for the notification process, but you have potentially city or county and even, you know, waste fees that kind of run into that are all kind of rolled up in that most of the times the contractor is footing. So there's a lot of cost that is not accounted for in that. So that raises the cost of the asbestos work in general. So asbestos work in general is just very, very expensive because it's very technical and it's, you know, the health impacts are potentially very, very damaging if you get impacted by it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. Again, what I'm trying to figure out though is what are we charging for exactly? Because I do understand all that, and I appreciate it. I've got my own experience in construction, but sometimes, for example, a person doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing. That there's asbestos. They don't know there's asbestos in the glue in stuff that was laying down floors in 1984. They just don't know that. But what does this fee get them? Is that where the process starts after they've already figured out they have it? Or is this what they do to ask you questions and stuff?
No, this is just to get a notification to let us know that they are doing an asbestos project, or, you know, this happens to be the same fee amounts for the demolition, or doing a demolition of their property. So
how do they know that they need to do this with us? I guess that's my question.
well, you know, hopefully we have good public outreach. We have good communication with city and county officials that do you know, permitting for renovation work and for demolition work. You know, sometimes we catch them after the fact, and then that's an issue. I feel we're doing a much better job now of pushing out that if you're going to do any work that requires this type of activity, or that is this type of activity, you need to get a survey, or you potentially need to get a demolition notification, because demolition isn't just knocking down a building. That could be exterior walls, engineered wood and stuff like that. So demolition is not just we're demolishing our building outright. You know, knocking down an exterior wall would be something that would fit the criterion for a demolition notification. So getting the word out to folks, I think is paramount. You know, we do a pretty good job, you know, post big storms, post big floods. When it comes time to, you know, when it's very nice out, that's when we see an increase in asbestos demolition fees, because everyone wants to do their work. So they, you know, Dan goes out to these home and garden shows, these master builder shows, and we do our best to get the word out to folks. So hopefully we have done our due diligence and gotten the word out to folks that they need to get a survey if they're going to be working in an area that has potential suspect material, and that list is pretty inclusive. And then they get their survey. So the survey is something that an individual or a contractor is going to get on their own. They're going to test all the suspect material in the work area or throughout the building, and that's going to basically drive, if they're a contractor, that's going to drive the fee structure below, which is a little bit more expensive. For the single family residents, what you were mentioning earlier, you know, that is essentially us doing a quick review of the survey, making sure they didn't miss anything, making sure that their notification is filled out right, and then issuing them their notification online via email.
Hey,
So that
so I do get it
Go
done.
ahead.
So you're saying though, they do their inspection, the inspection finds that they have something they think they need to look at. This is a process that goes through us, because once it's found, then there's a process that kicks in order for notifications and stuff like that. And that's what that fee is for. To start that
Yeah,
process.
it's
Okay,
like
so-
an administrative
Yeah,
fee.
no, I get it. I get it. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
then now the emergency, just so you know, one of the things I also worry about is that we make fees so high that we end up keep making people not do this stuff, because that's 10 times worse. And that'll bring up another question I have at the end that you brought up about being able to make sure that the ones that are costing us the most money, which are the ones that skip all this, and then we have to go through enforcement, which is a lot more expensive, that we also look at how that we're going to charge them for that. If it's negligence or done purposely, that should have a higher cost, since it's going to cost us to hire it. The other thing I wanted to know is, what is the emergency fee? What exactly
So the
does that
emergency,
cover?
so the emergency fee, you know, covers us basically stopping what we're doing in that instant and giving that project immediate attention. You know, we have many.
Buying up the ability
Correct.
to get started.
Yeah.
Okay, no, okay, I get that.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And just believe it or not, I'm going to say to you right now that needs to be higher. I know it's going to surprise, but when you do stuff like that and you didn't do your due diligence, I think that needs to be much higher if you want to skip in front of the line to everybody else. Just my 2 cents on that. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
Go ahead, Mike.
So tagging on to some of Randy's questions, when a business owner or homeowner pays this fee, is it likely that they're paying the fee or that their contractor is paying the fee?
So that's a heavy-handed question. So it depends. If you involve a contractor into the mix, it kind of raises the bar. So it no longer becomes a single family residence. So as soon as we, and I'm not talking about, surveyors, a Harris building inspectors doing a survey, because that's required for every project if there's suspect material. This is, I'm an individual doing my home myself. I do my own sampling because I can do that if I own my home. And I decide that it's too much for me and I have to get a professional to come in. So that resets the bar. So anything that I paid into before is kind of null and void. We now are talking contractor fees. So now going from that 47 proposed $100 bracket down to the potentially 201 and the $250 bracket. You mentioned business owners, so now we're talking NESHAP projects, so the wait time is kind of automatically at 14 days for these types of projects. And there's a lot involved, and typically the contractor will roll that up into the final invoice for that property owner.
But at that point, it sounds like it's the contractor that's handling.
Correct,
working
yeah.
with ORCAA.
And not, and you know, very, very few and far between do we have cases where we're dealing with the building owner, the business owner, and then the contractors for that project. It has happened though before.
Thank you. So then, the other thing I would just say is the briefing memo made a lot of sense. I can see the need. I see the logic. I appreciate that you're saying, let's look for efficiencies as well. The only suggestion that I have, or a question that I have, is, did you consider any sort of like phase in? So rather than having 1 year where these all increase, we do a slow increase over 2 years? That's just a thought.
I will be honest with you, no, we didn't. Something to take to Jeff and Mike and Tyson.
Yeah, that's certainly something we could talk about. One thing, and if I could just jump in, I know Greg has a question as well, and Dan, but in terms of the financial, in terms of the impact of, because some of these fees increases do look very large, like more than doubling the single family residence. But one thing that you might remember back when we talked about increasing the land clearing burn permit fees, we more than doubled that fee because of how out of date our fees were on that. And frankly, we did not have one person, we did not get one complaint with regards to that fee increase. Again, with land development, I mean, our thought, and I think it's proved to be true, is that there are so many other costs that, you know, ORCAA increasing a fee by, it looks like a large percentage, but relative to the other fees, it's still a relatively small amount. And again, that's not to say that we still need to justify these fee increases, but I think when you look at the bigger perspective of how the ORCAA part of the fees that asbestos contractors and other will charge, it's still a relatively small amount of what is being paid, or what it costs to do these projects.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to throw it out there. And if you guys want to talk about it internally and decide,
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Greg and then Dan.
Yeah, thanks. A couple questions, and I'm generally, you know, in favor of making sure we get as close to complete fee recovery as possible. I just want to make sure I understood the emergency fee, like for a single family house demolition, would be $200. Am I understanding the project, double the project correctly?
Correct.
Okay. And I think I'm with Brandy too. When you're jumping the line like that, you know, maybe more than a 2x fee is appropriate. You know, we want to incentivize people to do it at the appropriate time. Done demolitions before. This is a drop in the ocean. I'm not sure. I think we need to phase this in. I think Jeff's counsel is probably appropriate, you know, as we try to stay ahead of this. I mean, I guess, and my other question is, so we have a CPI add on to these already. So I just want to make sure we understand, and that I'm understanding correctly, that if we approve these fees to go into the budget, that they will continue to increase by CPI. And then, okay, I see nodding heads there. And then, given that we fell so far behind, is, you know, and Jeff and I talked a little bit about this in our meeting last week too, but is CPI the appropriate calculator for keeping these fees current as we move forward? Or do we need, I don't know, CPI times 1.5 or something? Why are we, if the demolition and asbestos removal inspections are going up higher than CPI, then maybe that is the wrong escalator for this fee. I'm just curious your thoughts.
I will pass it off to a little more
Yeah,
to answer that.
I would say we would need some sort of objective benchmark to measure increases by. Whether that's something that we create internally or we source another benchmark index. That could be definitely something we look at. Because as we can see, using the CPI, we're falling short. And we're playing catch up and it's causing these big increases in the fees. So, yeah, that's something definitely to consider, Greg.
Okay, well, and then one other final thing, this is just kind of protocol. I forgot. I think Jim was usually voting when he was an alternate on the finance committee because we only had two, but now that we have three members here, should I abstain from voting? I've been voting on these things, but I guess I'm asking Jeff here if I should be participating in votes as an alternate.
No, I think I think as an alternate, you can vote. I mean, essentially, this committee doesn't have any sort of separate decision making. It just goes to the board
Recommendations.
for recommendations to the board. So, I mean, I think we had conversations about if there were, like, for instance, when Emily was attending, even though she wasn't a member of the committee or the alternate, we didn't want to get into sort of quorum issues or other things. But I think, Greg, as the alternate, you can certainly participate as you've been and vote, I think, in terms of moving this forward to the full board. At least that's my understanding.
But he is also the chair of that board and needs to keep that in mind as you're going through with opinions and stuff like that, as you're supposed to remain impartial at points. So if you're voting, there is something to consider with that, Greg. Just
Copy that. Okay, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Dan.
Thanks. I just wanted to respond to Randy and let him know. I mean, part of our outreach, as Rob mentioned, was getting out to home shows and talking to people, getting into homeowners association contractor newsletters. But our big part of getting word out about the asbestos demo notification is working with cities and counties and making sure that your planning departments, your permitting departments are working with us, and most of our counties and cities do a good job of that. A lot of them have it on their own permits that before they issue a permit, they have to go through the ORCAA notification process. And working with Rob and Jen in the coming months, we'll be going out doing a road trips to cities and counties, working with those planning departments, not only to talk about continued partnerships on the asbestos demolition stuff, but also on any business development, the new business creations, making sure our NOC processes are followed before the fact instead of doing after the fact permitting. So just wanted to let you know that we are doing good outreach and working on that. And then it's also worth noting that this asbestos demolition program is federally mandated. So it's work that we are absolutely required to do, and we have streamlined it with changing it from a permit program to a notification program. So it's self-issuing notifications, and then we follow up instead of having them issue a permit application and then having multiple days of having to have staff review that. We can review it while that clock is running. So we have implemented some efficiencies already. And then just from a historical standpoint, talking about the CPI, I know whatever it was 10, 15 years ago when we implemented that, probably 12 years ago when we implemented that CPI escalator. Before that, we did not have an annual escalator, and so the numbers were even farther off base. So I think, Greg, you're right. We probably should look at seeing if that's the right number, but at least we do have a number now.
Go ahead, Randy.
that okay, Madam Chair?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so on the CPI, you know, it's real easy to look at something and say, well, we're not keeping up with the cost, but the CPI does work because it tells you what the actual cost of living is increased compared to what we may increase the project or the cost of what we're doing. This forces us to look at it and say, are we expending too much? Because the cost of living only went up so much. So to do away with that would make no sense. And to start adding other things on takes away the check and balance with the idea they need to stay within their budget with what it actually costs to do the job. I also want to throw out the idea that this is one of our main purposes for existence. So therefore, some of the monies that we get are already meant to do this. So it doesn't mean that we're supposed to recoup every single dollar of this in order to exist. We get paid other things for other jobs of this to cover some of those costs. It doesn't strictly come from that. Um, as I said earlier, I definitely have a problem with people that are doing things that they know are wrong. When I deal with it as a commissioner, it's because they already did. They already screwed up. They already purposely hit it. And then I'm getting the phone calls after the fact, and I'm finding out that they knew that that was supposed to be done. They chose not to. Those are the people that cost us the most money, the most time, the most headache, and that was a choice. It doesn't bother me when we charge them for that. With that being said, Dan, you made the comment about working with the cities and the counties and stuff. I completely agree with you, and I think that's where it's got to start. One of the questions I would have is, do we have a simple trigger list? What I mean by that, when we're dealing with the counties and our staff, it's nice if they know these things, but turnover and everything else they don't know. But if we have a simple list, for example, anything before this isn't based on reality, but anything before 1964 must go through such and such process. If we have lists that have those things that are included that are given to people as they go to apply for permits and stuff like that, then we know that it's not that complicated. Other people would not know that there was asbestos and glue that was used in manufactured homes to hold down the flooring. So that might be harder to go after. But if we have that list that goes to these counties to keep it simple, then again, I have no issue with they violate that simple list. That's a bigger fine.
So just a quick note, there is still asbestos products being sold today. So there is no cutoff date on construction. You could have a house built yesterday that has asbestos containing material in it. So, but that said, there are lists of likely areas that should be surveyed to meet our criteria, and Rob can talk to that better than I can. But that's something we do talk to the cities and county planning departments about and make sure that, and that's why we have things like uh, square footage or linear footage on some materials of if you do X amount of demolition, you have to go through our process just
Yeah.
because there's likely.
That's what I'm asking for. If we have it simplified to where we're saying that if we can't catch it all to find them, but if they follow outside of this framework, they're held accountable. And for that to happen through staff, it has to be very simple and very squared. Or else it gets lost in the million other things that they're supposed to be looking for and can't see everything. But if we have it simplified and they choose not to do it, like a manufacturer, I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
I don't know what those numbers would be, but a manufactured home produced in the 70s, I know has it. And so does everybody else. So these people that are tearing them down know it as well. I just came across a piece of property where they tore down a manufactured home that was from the 70s, and it's all sitting there in a pile in pieces right next to a creek. And I'm trying to figure out how to deal with that. I don't
Refer
have
them to
the,
us.
huh?
Let Rob know.
Refer them to us.
Yeah.
Let me
And
show
that
you
might
the
be, I guess, what
details.
we end up doing with it. Because I was just flabbergasted when I found that and saw that. Nobody knows, but these people knew what they were doing. That's why it's still there. You know, if
gonna go
it
to-
wasn't, they would have got rid of it.
Sorry, Randy, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm gonna go to Jeff real quick. He has his hand up.
I was just gonna say, so Randy, we can certainly share, we've got a number of asbestos demolition brochures and materials that we use, that we share. So Dan, maybe as a follow-up, you could send some of those links, some of those documents to Randy and the rest of the committee. Again, so those are things that we've tried to simplify it, and we're constantly reviewing and looking at it. Unfortunately, asbestos, it's complicated. There's just a lot of steps and processes. But we do try to, again, because we know that the folks at the permit departments of the cities and counties are dealing with all kinds of things, and they're not asbestos experts, and so we do try to simplify it. And so the things that do trigger or require ORCA action, we try to make that clear. But certainly, if you have suggestions or anyone else has suggestions about how to simplify or clarify some of these things, we're open to suggestions.
Yeah, I'm only talking about the finding aspect of it. For example, if you simplified it so much that you have these 10 things that they're given every time they get a permit, if they violate those, that's a $500 fine, boom, or $1,000, because they know there's no way that it's not. That's what I'm talking about. It's a simplification to where we can hold them more accountable, not just for my staff or anything else. I'd like to hold these people accountable when they purposely do this and hide it. And they know they're doing it when you got a 70s trailer, and that's why it's still there.
Yeah.
And Randy, you've given me some good ideas on materials that we can develop to work with the professional staff at the cities and counties, as well as to have them share. So I'll keep in touch with you, and Rob and I can work on that. And when we get out to Mason County's departments, we'll make sure you're CC'd and invite you along on those outings.
Thank you. So I do have one question / point to make. When it comes to like working with cities and counties and their permitting departments, it sounds like for the most part, they're doing a good job. I'm curious, I had this same question either last year or the year before when I first got started on ORCA. And I was wondering how well our county permitting department is working with ORCA and how up to date they are on what requires or triggers conversation with ORCA. But someone brought up the point of like staff turnover in government, and that's a good point. And if there's not materials that are memorialized somewhere on the county side or city side, how do we know that the current staff, when there is turnover, is up to speed on that? So for me personally, I'm probably gonna go back to Thurston County and talk to our CPED staff to make sure, just to kind of check in and touch base with them and see if they feel like they're up to speed. I know with all the budget issues that we've all been facing, there's probably a high likelihood that there has been some staff turnover in a lot of our jurisdictions. So I'll probably go and get a refresher from Thurston County to make sure that they have everything they need, just to try to do my part in making sure everyone's in the loop about what's required.
So Rob, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I will say I think Thurston County is doing it right in that, in terms of circumventing the problems with staff turnover, they actually have a checkbox on your remodel demolition permit that says, we will not issue this permit until you share your ORCA notification with us.
So by and large, Thurston County is doing a really good job. You know, I attend, I think it's every month, a meeting with code enforcement or compliance. They all kind of get mixed up. I do one with Mason County as well. I'm missing today's to be here, obviously. So I already told Ian that I'm going to be missing that one today. But I think those are important because I look at them as force multipliers right in the field where, you know, the other day, Wendy from Mason County called me about a project, and now we have one of our inspectors doing a joint inspection with them. We do that a lot with Thurston County, you know, public health, you know, Mark and Kimberly and their team. We do a lot of joint inspections, and kind of one of the things in terms of efficiency that we're kind of getting after is developing these relationships. And that's why Dan is kind of helping Jennifer and I go out and, you know, kind of meet and greet, press the flesh, and just make these connections. And then, you know, to your point, developing continuity books for folks, I think is vital, because you lose that knowledge every time someone leaves, right? So I think that's important as well, to kind of start developing or reinforce or rebuild if that is kind of falling apart.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to bring up, I mean, take this with a grain of salt, because I'm from Thurston County, and it sounds like we're doing things right out here, but I would say don't be afraid to bring it up in a meeting if you're having a hard time getting a hold of a certain jurisdiction's staff, because, we're here to advocate for you, so, I'm sure that everyone on this board takes that role really seriously, so if you don't wanna bring it up at a meeting, maybe you could just pull someone aside at the end and be like, hey, can we meet with your staff, or hey, can you connect us, because I think we all wanna make sure we're doing our part too.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
thank you. I mean, Rob talks about force multipliers as a warrior army guy. I talk about message amplification as a writer communications guy. So same idea, get the most bang for the buck. And if we can get other people to help us with our work and we all support each other, it's a benefit to everybody.
Yeah. All right, so do we still have some more on this update?
Well, and I wasn't sure exactly what, I mean, so again, we are looking for action from the finance committee about giving staff direction on including this in our budget proposal. I wasn't sure if, do you want, so the board has access to this, but it wasn't included, or it hasn't been included on the board agenda for today. Do you want us to brief the full board on this, say in February, or do you want to make a recommendation that just to include this as part of our draft budget, that then would be briefed to the board, either probably in March or April? I wasn't sure exactly what the committee wanted staff to do in terms of this proposal moving forward. But again, what we're looking for is direction. Can we include this as part of our draft budget that we're working on, that we'll be bringing to this committee in March?
Okay, thank you. So Randy, go ahead.
I don't think it's ready for that. We just got a little blush of looking at it, and you're asking us to start to implement and put it into thing. I think that's way in front of the bus. I appreciate what we're looking at here, but I think that we should talk about this a little more and look at how to tweak it to get the best outcome. That's why we had the conversation. We just had a conversation and nothing came out of it other than our ideas and our opinions. If we just want to ignore all the ideas and opinions, then yeah, put it on the agenda. We'll start to put it forward and stuff like that. But why would we do that? If we're going to include us in the conversation, then let's have a conversation and start to look at how we can structure it.
Thanks, Randy. I would say for me personally, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily too fast. I would say it would be too fast if we were being asked to make a decision right now about putting it in the budget and then passing the budget with those new numbers. I would be interested in seeing kind of side by side what a budget looks like with the increases and at like status quo. And then I don't know how the finance committee feels about this, but maybe like a in-between option, like what would it look like if ORCAA staff gets together and thinks about a phased approach? It sounds like that may be something that we could hear a little bit more about as a finance committee, like what could that look like, a 2-year phased approach? I definitely think an increase of some sort needs to happen. It might not look like this at the end of the day, but it based on everything I'm hearing and how long it's been since any increases were implemented and just the cost of this work, I think there absolutely has to be some sort of increase. But I'd be interested in kind of seeing, because like Randy said, a lot of ideas have been shared. It would be interesting to see like what those thoughts and ideas can actually create in terms of like line item budget. So if we could see status quo budget, in between option, whatever staff can come up with there, and then this proposal in the budget, if that's not too much, I would be interested in seeing that and then having that conversation again at the finance committee next month. Does that feel comfortable, Randy?
That's actually exactly what I was saying. I may not have communicated it as well as you did, but that's what I meant. We just had all this conversation. What does it look like? Let's put it together and look at it. We start throwing it into the budget now. Then what did we just have all the conversations for? So no, and I can see Jeff's eyes that he was not understanding what I was saying. So I'm glad that you clarified it. Jeff, did she make better sense than I just did?
Yes, I think so. I mean, in terms of the conversation we've had today, I mean, we talked about the emergency fee, and I did hear that, well, maybe we should look at more than doubling it. I mean, that's a specific fee proposal. There were questions about, well, the single family residence fee, and that is a large increase. But I didn't hear specific, so we can look at this and this proposal. I haven't heard, so I'm not exactly sure what, I mean, I think what I'm hearing is what do these increases look like in the context of the overall agency budget that we'll be putting together for next fiscal year? Is that more kind of again, if we're looking at,
Well,
you know,
I need to know more about what these things are. My intention is to call you guys after the fact and maybe Dan just have you guys explain a little bit more so I look at what we're actually putting together and how it gets triggered for myself to understand that better before we start making recommendations on what those amounts are, on what are they. I asked a few questions, but this was a little deeper than that when we started looking into it.
wait, hold on, we're still in a meeting.
Almost done. Thanks, Randy, and then it sounds like you're in the middle of a question. Did you want to finish your question?
No,
Okay.
I think I'm good. So, but actually I would look to Tyson. Do you have a sense kind of for what, because I mean, there's, it sounds like what the committee is asking for is a little bit more education around about the asbestos program. One of the things that I know it's been over a year ago now, I think, but Bryson came to the board and gave kind of an update, a walkthrough of kind of the asbestos program, how it works. And we've got a video of that, so maybe we can share a link to that, you know, like 10-minute, 15-minute presentation at a board meeting from, I think it was maybe 2024, that might be a good kind of refresher of kind of how does the asbestos program work. And then what I'm hearing is sort of, so I'm hearing we need more discussion. So we will can certainly tee it up for the conversation in February and then going forward on the budget. But I guess if there's specific questions that you're asking for, I would ask that you let us know.
So I have to echo Jeff there. Please bring specific questions to us, instead of, we want to know more about this. You know, specific questions really help us prepare answers that you guys are really looking for. So, yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
I have some specifics. I think that was a great suggestion. So my specific questions would be, do we think there's any of these categories that we will see, you know, there will be more of an impact to the developer than not? So what we heard, you know, from Jeff on what, I can't remember that other class, the land clearing permit fee, we really didn't hear any feedback from it. And so that to me says, well, we stayed in our lane. We didn't go so far that we got this backlash. We stayed in our lane and we did the right job. Are there any of these that we feel like there might be some pushback? And on those, would staff recommend any sort of phase in over multiple years? Secondly, from a public policy perspective, it's very easy for me to defend an asbestos fee. I think there's a lot of public understanding about the dangers of asbestos. From a public policy perspective, I want demolitions to happen. I live in a rural region that has a lot of brownfield, a lot of redevelopment potential, but that's not realized. When I was a city council member, I suggested maybe the city of Port Angeles should stand up a demolition utility of some sort and demolish some structures that have just turned into blights. So I don't want to disincentivize demolition. So I will look more critically at demolition fees than I will at asbestos fees. And if staff has any thoughts on that, bring them to February. Other than that, I liked the idea of the emergency is double the right amount. And I think that's all that I had.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. And that's a really good point about the differentiation between the asbestos and demolition in your jurisdiction and why that's important. I'm in support of the emergency being the double the project amount, and I haven't heard much pushback on that. Looking up at the screen just to make sure I'm right on that, but it seems like you've got support for the emergency fee being double the project amount. So that's a specific thing I think we can all get behind. I'd be interested in like maybe understanding kind of what we just heard, but like specifically around the single family residence by owner. Because if we're gonna impact, I mean, I think you're right that in the grand scheme of things, $47 to $100 probably won't look like much, but a lot of people are struggling right now. And we want them to get this work done. We want them to take care of things. And if there's asbestos that they're needing to address, we don't want them to ignore that because of a fee increase. So I think we should maybe consider like the capacity that homeowners might have with everything that's going on. And maybe that's a fee that we try to increase only minimally if we increase it. While looking at the other amounts as maybe being something that are better supported. I know I would be in support of the proposed increases pretty much across the board. What I'm seeing, I would just have a question mark when it comes to how are we impacting homeowners that are just trying to do the right thing and go through the process as required. And I see Rob stand up.
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that the single family residences, if it is, you know, the owner of the property doing the work themselves, we kind of scrutinize that a little bit because they are untrained. They basically are looking at YouTube videos, they're looking at how-to videos, and you know, ORCAA does provide some guidance on how to address popcorn ceiling, linoleum flooring, and then siding. But that's it. There's a lot of asbestos out there, and if not treated properly, you could, you know, risk yourself. I had a case down in, I think it was Pacific County, where it was a church, and they were just trying to do the right thing, trying to clean up a blight property, and they're like, got all these church volunteers, and they exposed everybody to, they had fans blowing with ACM tile blowing in there, and I walked in there and I got hit in the face with a bunch of dust, and I was like, we got to get out of here right now. Everybody is being impacted by this, and you know, it was, you know, I was calling as many people as I could, LNI, and luckily we resolved that one, but again, that would have been a single family residence technically, because he's the owner of that property. That's a church organization or whatever, and they don't know what they don't know. So that requires a little bit more scrutiny. We will, you know, if we're picking between, you know, KD&S doing a project and, you know, Joe Smith, we're going to visit Joe Smith because Joe Smith probably doesn't know how to do the work, whereas, you know, the contractors do know how to do the work. So that's why we kind of gig them a little bit more stringently as well on the enforcement side, and we give a little bit of leeway to homeowners because they don't know. We try to educate them as best we can. So
That makes sense.
But it sounds like, but we do spend a fair amount of time
Correct,
with the
yeah.
individual
yeah,
homeowners.
and luckily there's not a lot of single family residences. FY25 we had about like 30 to 40 single family residents by homeowner asbestos projects for that time period, where we had like, you know, the 300 plus of the other projects.
Yeah,
So,
okay, that makes sense. Well, I know we're a little past time, so I think we should probably wrap up, but are there any other questions or any specific things we want staff to come back with in February? Go ahead, Greg.
Just a reminder that I'm going to ask you for a report out on this meeting at the next board meeting. So, you know, consider how you'll represent this meeting. But good job.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, any final questions, thoughts? All right. Well, then, anything for good of the order? All right, perfect. Well, then we can go ahead and adjourn, and I will see you all in a couple minutes. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody, for the good discussion.
thank you.